I met him on a Thursday. Not the kind of Thursday you remember, no storm, no sunlight, just one of those days that passes quietly until you look back and realize that's the day everything began to change. I was Evelyn Marks, 61 years old, and I hadn't expected anything new, not love, not excitement, not even hope. My days were quiet, my routines predictable, and my heart, well, my heart had made peace with being alone. Then came Daniel, 65, soft-spoken, silver-haired, with the kind of eyes that looked like they'd seen every kind of heartbreak, and still somehow they smiled. He didn't come with roses. He came with honesty, told me up front that he'd been widowed 5 years ago, that he wasn't looking for fireworks, just someone who could sit in silence without it feeling empty. That's all it took. I didn't fall fast. I slipped, quietly, slowly, like a woman who had been waiting all her life to be seen again. But what if being seen wasn't the same as being chosen? What if I wasn't the start of something new, just a soft place for him to land when no one else would catch him? This is Ex-Wife Diaries. And if you're a woman over 40 who gave her heart a second chance, only to realize she was someone's backup plan, then this story is yours. Hit subscribe to Ex-Wife Diaries right now, because what you're about to hear might feel too familiar. He said all the right things, not in a slick, romantic way, but the kind of things that feel like medicine. He remembered how I took my tea. He noticed when my hand trembled from old arthritis and quietly helped without making me feel broken. He made me laugh again, a real laugh, the kind I thought I'd buried with the pieces of my failed marriage. We started small, walks in the park, Sunday mornings at the farmer Sepp's market, slow jazz on the back porch. He said things like, "I never felt this kind of peace before." And when you're 61, when life has shown you that peace is rare, that love comes with conditions, you hold on to words like that. You believe them. And I did. We shared stories. He told me about his late wife, how she died too soon. I told him about my divorce, how 27 years of loyalty ended with a voicemail and a younger woman. We didn't hide our scars. We held them in front of each other like war medals. And for the first time in a long time, I felt chosen. Or at least I thought I was. Then the little things started. He would flinch when I talked about our future. Nothing big, just a twitch in the brow, a pause in the sentence, the kind of hesitation that you feel more than you hear. I offered to introduce him to my son. He nodded, but never brought it up again. His phone always seemed face down, silent, private, but I pushed those thoughts away. I told myself, "You're overthinking. You always do this. Don't ruin it." Until that one evening, the dinner that changed everything. It was a small dinner at his place. Just the two of us. Candlelight, roasted salmon, wine. We laughed. We danced. Slowly, awkwardly. He held me close, like I was breakable, like I mattered. And then he said it. "You remind me of her." I smiled, assuming he meant his wife. But then he added, "Not just her, all of them." That's when the coldness hit me, not from his words, but from his ease in saying them. All of them. He asked, "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "You know, the ones who cared. The ones who helped me fill the space." He poured more wine, as if that would smooth over the crack he'd just made in my heart. Was I just filling a space, too? I asked. He looked at me, paused. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe." That one word became the echo in my chest. The rest of the evening passed like I was underwater, smiling, nodding, floating, all while my mind sank to the bottom of the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how many women had stood where I stood, thinking they were a second chance, when really, they were just a distraction. Was it the comfort of my presence, my silence, or just the fact that I said yes when others said no? I tried to rationalize, tried to excuse it, but then I saw the drawer. He left the room to shower, and something told me, check that drawer, not because I'm a snoop, but because I'm a woman who's ignored too many instincts for too many years. And there it was. Letters, pictures, a photo album. Not just of his wife, but of two other women, notes from them. One had a lipstick kiss on the corner, all recent. One of the notes said, "Thanks for the weekend." It felt real. I wasn't his real. I was just another one of the women who felt like home until he got bored. And suddenly, 61 felt like 16 again, standing in front of a boy who never intended to stay. I wish I could tell you that I walked out that night, that I screamed, threw the wine glass, made a scene, but I didn't sit, because heartbreak at this age doesn't come with drama. I just left, and the next morning, when he texted, "Had a lovely night. Hope you're okay," I said nothing, because I wasn't okay. And I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. But what I found later that week, that was what made everything unravel. What made me realize just how many lies a man can hide behind the word peace. And you are going to want to hear that part, because it gets worse. Much worse. I didn't tell anyone. Not my son. Not my best friend. Not even the woman at the bakery who always asked how I was doing with that hopeful little smile. It's funny how quickly shame wraps itself around you, like a coat you didn't ask for, but now can't take off in public. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the photos or the letters, or even the kiss marks on those paper corners. It was the silence that came after. The moment when I realized I had no one to blame but myself, because the signs were always there, but I had ignored them. Because after 60, loneliness is no longer just an ache, it becomes a shadow that follows you home. It greets you at the door, it sleeps beside you, and when someone offers to hold you again, even if their arms are temporary, you say yes, because you miss the sound of your name being said, like it matters. 3 days passed. I stayed quiet, cleaned the house, rearranged bookshelves, read the same chapter of the same novel 5 times without remembering a single sentence. My heart wasn't broken. Not in the teenage kind of way. It was bruised, and that bruising went deep. On the 4th day, Daniel called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Evelyn, I'm in thinking about you. Hope everything's all right. Miss our mornings. Our mornings." That stung. He knew what he was doing. He always did. Using warmth like a fishing line, waiting for me to bite again. But I didn't I wanted answers. Yes, but I wanted dignity more. And yet, I couldn't stop the questions from piling up in my mind like unopened letters. Who were those other women? Did they know about each other? Did they know about me? Was I just the Tuesday slot? The silence between us stretched. 1 week, then 2, and then came the envelope. It arrived in my mailbox, without a return address. My name was written in pen, not his handwriting. Inside, a single photo. A picture of Daniel at a cafe, holding hands with a woman, not young, maybe early 60s. Her eyes looked familiar, not because I knew her, but because she wore the same expression I once did. Soft, hopeful, unaware. There was no note, no explanation. But on the back of the photo, written in all caps, "You're not the only one." That's when something shifted in me. The sadness curdled into something sharper, not anger. Not yet, but suspicion. And that suspicion led me down a path I never thought I'd take. I went online, typed his full name into Google just to see what might surface. At first, nothing. The usual LinkedIn profile, an old listing for a boat he once sold, an alumni photo from his college. Then I clicked deeper. Forums, obituaries, comments, and there she was. A woman named Margot Green had posted in a grief support group. Still can set believe he ghosted after 3 months. Said he wasn't set ready for commitment. Same week I saw him on a walk with someone else. Posted only 6 weeks ago. I stared at the post like it was a mirror. Margot wasn't some bitter stranger. She was me in another timeline. I clicked her profile. No photo, no details. So I created a new account, sent her a message. Hi. I think we may have something in common. His name is Daniel, right? I didn't expect a reply. But 5 minutes later, she wrote back. That conversation was the first of many, and it opened the floodgates. Margot wasn't the only one. There were at least 4 others, all in the same age bracket. All kind, smart, warm-hearted women who had believed Daniel when he said things like, "You are different," or "I never felt this safe." One woman, Claire, had even introduced him to her grandchildren. He left the morning after. Said he got spooked by the intensity of it all. Each story had the same skeleton. He would find them, usually through a local church group, a book club, a dating site for over 50s. He would speak gently, show up for a month or 2, say all the right things, and disappear before real roots could grow. But the worst part? He always left just enough kindness behind to make you doubt yourself, to make you wonder if you were the one who asked for too much. He was a professional at emotional camouflage, not a criminal, not a common artist, just a man with an addiction to being needed. And he had been getting away with it for years. I wanted to scream, not because I hated him, but because I hated the version of me that had trusted so easily. But then again, was that wrong? To want love? To believe that at 61, I could be wanted for more than just my patience or my silence? The answer is no. It's never wrong to hope, but it's deadly to ignore your gut. So I did something I never thought I said do. I invited him over. Not to scream, not to demand, but to give him one last chance to look me in the eyes and tell me who he really was. He arrived with flowers. Of course he did. Pink lilies, my favorite. "How've you been, Evelyn?" he asked. Like we hadn't just spent weeks in a silent standoff. "I'd been better," I said. He sat down like it was his living room, like he still belonged here. That was Daniel's gift. He never asked permission. He made you feel like you invited him. "Wisbeth missed you," he said. I nodded. "That makes sense." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said. Locking eyes with him. "I've been talking to Claire, and Margot, and Julia, and Linda. All the women you missed right after telling them they were the love of your life." His face didn't crack. He just exhaled, softly. Then he smiled. "I see," he said. "So they found each other. Not a trace of panic, not even shame. You're not even going to deny it?" I asked. "There is nothing to deny," he replied. "We all get what we need, Evelyn. I gave them company. They gave me peace. No one got hurt. No one got hurt." I repeated, my voice shaking. He shrugged. "No one was promised anything." I stood up, shaking. "You were never lonely, Daniel. You were greedy." He stood too, placed the flowers gently on the table. "I'm sorry you see it that way," he said. And then he left. Just like that. As if I were a hotel room he'd already checked out of. I sat on the couch for a long time after that, staring at those pink lilies. They were beautiful. But they meant nothing now, because now I knew the truth. I wasn't at his beginning or his ending. I was just one more warm seat in a long line of temporary comforts. But what happened next, after Daniel, is the part of the story I didn't expect. Because a week later, I got a message from someone new, not a man, but someone who had been watching from the sidelines this whole time, and what she told me, it changed everything. I should have known something was off the night we went to that little Italian place off Bellevue. Marcus had picked it, said it reminded him of Tuscany, where he'd once spent a month writing in a vineyard. The candles flickered low, the pasta was perfect, and he held my hand across the table like I was the only woman in the world. But just as the waiter poured our wine, his phone buzzed again. He flipped it upside down, too fast, and smiled that rehearsed smile of his. He said it was just his brother, checking on their mother. I believed him. Of course I did. Because when you've waited years for someone to finally look at you like that, you convince yourself the interruptions are just life, not lies. But that night, something inside me tightened, like a thread pulled too hard, about to snap. A week later, we were at his place. He'd cooked for me, risotto, the way he knew I loved it. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through a photo album he'd left out. I didn't even mean to pry, but there, tucked in the back sleeve, was a card, a birthday card. It read, "To the man who makes every morning worth waking up for. Love, Jay." I stared at that J like it had teeth. I didn't say anything. I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I folded the card back into its envelope and slid it where it belonged, hidden. Pretending not to know had become easier than facing what I already suspected. He returned with wine, kissed the top of my head, and sat beside me like nothing was wrong. And I smiled like a woman who didn't just see the ghost of another woman on her boyfriend's bookshelf. The next few days, I started watching more closely. His stories didn't always line up. He was at work late a lot. He forgot things he'd told me just days before, and once, when I asked about his sister, the one he claimed lived in Vermont, he paused too long before answering, like flipping through a mental Rolodex for the lie he'd used last. I felt myself shrinking, questioning everything, but still, I stayed. Why? Because I'd convinced myself that this flawed, uneven relationship was still better than the silence of my apartment, than the echo of an empty phone. One morning, I decided to surprise him. He'd said he had a dentist appointment downtown, so I thought I'd swing by after and take him to lunch. Just a small gesture, something sweet. But when I parked across from his office building, I saw him, not alone. He was standing at the curb, holding the hand of a woman with hair the color of copper pennies and heels too high for casual Fridays. They were laughing. Close. Too close. And then, she kissed him. Not on the cheek. Not in that polite, friendly way. I couldn't breathe. My heart thudded so loud I thought it would crack the windshield. He didn't see me. I didn't want him to. I just sat there, shaking, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to this earth. That was the moment, not just of heartbreak, but of humiliation, of realization. I wasn't his beginning. I wasn't even his middle. I was the layover. The backup, the convenient, safe place to land, until his real life came calling again. And the worst part? I let him. I drove home numb. Didn't cry, didn't scream, just sat on the edge of my bed with my shoes still on, staring at the floor like it owed me answers. That night I blocked his number. But 2 days later, he came knocking. With flowers, with excuses, with stories about old friends and misunderstandings and "you're overthinking this." I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to throw those roses into the street, but I didn't. Instead, I let him talk. Because I needed to hear it. Every word, every twist, every desperate attempt to make my truth sound like paranoia. I needed to feel the betrayal in my bones, to remember why I could never go back. When he finally paused, waiting for me to soften, I asked one question. Was I ever the only one? He looked away, just for a second, but that second told me everything. He didn't send answer. He didn't send and did need to. I closed the door. That should have been the end, but as I stood in my hallway breathing in the scent of roses I hadn't asked for, I realized something chilling. I hadn't been the first, and I wouldn't be the last. He didn't just use women. He collected them, like stepping stones, like mirrors reflecting the version of himself he wanted to believe was real. And I had been his reflection, not his partner, not his choice. Just the woman who made him feel whole until someone shinier came along. Evelyn Marks, 61 years old, finally understood what it meant to be a backup plan. And she wasn't going to be anyone's second choice ever again. The morning after I shut the door on Marcus, I woke up before dawn, not because I couldn't sleep, but because something inside me was finally waking up, something I hadn't felt in years. I didn't instead cry. I made tea. Not coffee. Tea. Strong, black, bitter. Something that matched the storm still quieting inside me. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on cold tiles, watching the steam rise from the mug. My home was silent. Not lonely, just still. And for the first time in months, that stillness didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a starting point. I walked through the hallway, past the bookshelf, where the photo of my wedding still sat tucked between old novels. I picked it up, stared at the woman in the white dress, wide-eyed and naive, standing next to a man I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Frank had left long ago. Said he needed space to grow, a phrase that still made me want to laugh and scream in equal measure. But even he, with his self-help books and yoga retreats, had at least been honest in the end. Marcus wasn't sat. I called my best friend Delilah later that morning. She answered on the first ring, like she always did. "You okay?" she asked. No greeting needed. "I will be," I said. And for once, I meant it. She came over with bagels and that lemon cake from the French bakery I loved. We sat on the patio in our old robes like two women in their 60s should, not performing for anyone, not fixing anyone, not shrinking for love. She listened as I told her everything, about the card, about the woman, about the kiss on the sidewalk. Delilah, God bless her, didn't say, "I told you so," though I saw it flicker across her face for a second. Instead, she leaned in and said, "You saw it through. You gave it every chance. And now you walk away with your eyes open." I nodded, but inside, a different thought was taking root. It wasn't just about walking away. It was about never being blind again. The days that followed were quiet, but intense. I scrubbed the apartment clean. Not just the dust, but the memories. I threw out the wine glasses Marcus had gifted me, deleted every playlist he'd made, and even burned the scented candle he once lit when I stayed over. Small rebellions, maybe, but they felt like steps back to myself. Then came the phone call. Blocked number. I answered anyway. It was her. The woman with the copper penny hair. "Is this Evelyn?" Her voice was smooth but strained, like she wasn't sure if I'd hang up. "Yes," I said, ice solid in my throat. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't seem to know about you." He told me he was single. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry at her, but because I had nothing left to offer that conversation. No rage, no envy, just exhaustion. She continued, I found your number in his phone, under work. And I knew something was off. I just didn't know it was this bad. That hit like a sucker punch. Work, as if I was a client, a meeting, a task. I said, calmly, you weren't the only one he lied to. There was a pause, then, softly, he does this. I thought it was just me, but it's as a pattern. She started to cry. I let her pour it all out. And strangely, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt connected. Two women, both misled, both discarded when it suited him. There was something powerful in that. Something ancient, like we were survivors of the same shipwreck, clinging to pieces of truth. When the call ended, I sat back and stared out the window. The clouds had broken, and the sun was finally clawing its way across the sky. Golden, harsh, honest. I didn't return to dating apps. I didn't seek closure from Marcus. I didn't text him back when he sent one last message 2 days later. I still care about you. Please don't throw us away. I didn't throw us away. He did. Every time he chose lies over love. Every time he saw me as convenient rather than cherished. And what he didn't know, what he would never know, was that I had already started writing again. Journals at first, then short stories, little scenes about women like me. Not broken, just bruised, not forgotten, just finally remembering themselves. One afternoon, Delilah read a piece I'd written and said, you should share this. Women need this. We need this. I laughed. Who wants to hear from a 61-year-old woman nursing heartbreak? She looked me dead in the eye. Every woman who's been told it's too late. Every woman who thinks she missed her moment. That night, I opened a blank WordPress blog and typed, second chances aren't always love stories. Sometimes they wake-up calls. And I posted it. No one read it at first, but I didn't care, because that post wasn't for the world. It was for me, the woman who once thought silence was safer than truth, who thought being chosen mattered more than being respected. And I realized something that startled me. This journey through betrayal, loss, and rediscovery wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. I had been so focused on finding love again that I forgot what it meant to love myself, to honor my boundaries, to listen to that quiet voice inside me, the one that always knew when something was wrong. Marcus didn't break me. He exposed what was already cracked, and now I was sealing those fractures with gold, like those Japanese bowls mended with lacquer and gold dust, not to hide the damage, but to highlight it, to honor the history. I was becoming one of them. Flawed, beautiful, stronger because of where I'd broken. Evelyn Marks, 61 years old, no longer wanted a second chance with someone else. She wanted a lifetime of first chances with herself. The email came on a Thursday. Subject line, from one writer to another. It wasn't spam. It wasn't from Marcus, and it wasn't from the woman he had hurt alongside me. It was from a reader, a woman named Clara, 64 years old, who had stumbled on my blog by accident, or fate, depending on how poetic you want to be. She wrote, I read your story last night. I couldn't sleep afterward. I been divorced for 10 years. I thought I healed until I realized I only been pretending not to bleed. Her words struck a nerve. She wasn't just commenting, she was confessing, like so many women do, quietly, under the cover of anonymity, when they see a piece of themselves in someone else's heartbreak. And that's when I knew my pain had become a mirror for others. By the end of that week, there were 4 more messages, then 8, then over 30, all women, all 50 and older, all with stories of being the almost, the maybe, the second choice, the backup plan. These weren't weak women. These were teachers, nurses, business owners, grandmothers, artists, women who had once poured their hearts into someone who couldn't return the favor. Women who had buried their stories under responsibilities, reputations, and regret. Women like me. I started replying to every email, late into the night, cup of tea on my nightstand, my fingers flying across the keyboard, as if making up for the years I stayed silent. They weren't just writing to me, they were writing to each other through me, forming something unspoken but sacred. We weren't set a support group. We were a reckoning. I posted a new piece the next morning titled, "You're not too old to start over. You're too wise to start wrong again." It exploded, shared hundreds of times, emails pouring in faster than I could read them. Some women sent poems, others sent drawings, one sent a voice note. Her voice trembled as she said, "I left him this morning, after 34 years. Because of your words." I cried that night, not for myself, but for the collective grief that had been sleeping inside so many women. And I realized something else. Marcus didn't just lie to me, he underestimated me. He thought I was a woman who needed him to feel worthy again. But I wasn't sent. I was a woman rediscovering her fire. And I was starting to burn brighter than ever. One afternoon, Delilah came by, holding a sleek silver box. Inside was a brand new microphone. "I got you this," she said, grinning. "You've been writing. Now speak." "A podcast." I laughed, half horrified. "A podcast," she nodded. "Your voice matters." I started small, 1 episode a week. I called it Second Act Stories. No fancy intros. Just me, my voice, and truth. The first episode was titled, "He Called Me His Angel," until I learned I was just filling his silence. The moment it uploaded, my stomach churned. What if no one listened? What if I was just shouting into a void? But they listened. By week 2, I had 600 downloads. By week 3, 4,000. Women messaged me saying they listened while cooking, while walking the dog, while staring at old wedding photos in the attic. And slowly, something unexpected happened. Men started writing in too. One man said, "My mother is 67. I sent her your podcast. She cried. She hasn't stayed dated in 20 years. Another said, "I did what Marcus did. I had 2 women. You made me realize what I destroyed." Even Marcus reached out again. He sent a long, meandering message filled with excuses, reflection, and nostalgia. But there was one sentence that made my heart clench. "I always thought you send be waiting if it didn't send work out with her." There it was, the truth. I wasn't his second chance. I was his backup plan. The emergency exit, the soft landing. I didn't set reply. Instead, I opened my next episode with a different tone, bolder, clearer. Sometimes closure doesn't come from an apology. Sometimes it comes from finally realizing what you deserve. And then I told the story. All of it. No filters. No grace for his memory. I spoke not to destroy him, but to free myself from the last whisper of his shadow. That episode went viral. 1 week later, I got an invitation to speak at a women's event in Boston. A small, intimate gathering of women over 50 who were using storytelling as healing. I said yes. I wore a navy blue dress that hugged my hips, heels that made me 2 inches taller, and lipstick that dared to say, I'm not fading away. When I walked onto the stage, there were 120 women looking back at me, eyes wide, some teary, some smiling. I said, "Evelyn," I said, voice steady, and I said, 61. I thought my story ended when my husband left. I thought my second chance came wrapped in a man's sex charm and promises, but I was wrong. Pause. Breath. My second chance started the day I stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing myself. They rose to their feet, not because I was extraordinary, but because I was finally visible. After that night, my blog grew. My podcast ranked in the top 100 for self-healing. I was invited to write a column for a small online magazine that catered to women over 60. I wasn't chasing love anymore. I was chasing legacy. Every time I picked up the mic, I pictured the women who had written me, the ones afraid to speak up, afraid to leave, afraid to start over. And I told myself, they need to hear you before they forget themselves again. One afternoon, while recording an episode titled "Why We Stay Too Long," I stopped mid-sentence, because I remembered a moment with Marcus, one I hadn't thought of in months. He once told me, "You set too intense, too much in your head." And for a second, I believed him. But now I knew that too much woman was the reason strangers were healing through earbuds. That too much woman had become a lighthouse for others lost in the same fog. He didn't leave me because I was too much. He left because he couldn't handle someone finally seeing through him. And that was never my burden to carry. Not anymore. I was in the middle of recording a new episode, one about the lies we tell ourselves just to keep loving the wrong people, when I got the call. Not from Marcus, not from Delilah. It was my son, Jonah. "Mom," he said, his voice tight. "Are you okay?" I paused. Fine, sweetheart. You might want to check the link I just sent you. Something's going around." My heart sank. The last time I heard that tone was when he called to tell me his father had moved in with someone barely older than Jonah himself. I opened the link. There it was. A viral post from Marcus Sepp's new partner. Not just a partner, apparently. They gotten married, quietly, privately, and the post was a gushing love letter, with one line that felt like acid. I'm so grateful I didn't waste another minute pretending I was someone else's second choice. Jonah didn't know the whole story. He only knew enough to feel protective. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said gently. "I just thought you should hear it from me." I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the screen. That sentence wasn't about me, but it was aimed at me. She knew. Marcus must have told her everything, or worse, she knew from the beginning, and stayed anyway, just like I did, just like we do, thinking we'll be the exception to a rule that always wins. I didn't cry, not then, not when it would have been easy. Instead, I recorded the rest of my episode in one take. My voice was steel. "I once believed I was building something with a man who saw my worth," I said into the mic, "but sometimes what you sit's building is a story for his ego, not your healing." After I uploaded it, I went for a walk. The sky was bruised with clouds. A wind picked up, tugging at the hem of my coat. I walked without direction, hands stuffed into pockets, memories bubbling up like smoke. The first time Marcus kissed me. The day he told me he left his wife. The morning I made him pancakes, and he said, "This feels like home." I had believed him. But the truth? He didn't want a home. He wanted a haven. A place to hide when life felt too loud, and when he was ready to face the world again, he left and took my peace with him. I sat on a park bench under an old maple tree and let my head fall back. And for the first time, I didn't replay our story. In my version, I didn't wait for closure. I didn't become a footnote in someone else's redemption arc. I walked away with fire in my chest and words in my hands. The next morning, I posted something new. Just because they found happiness doesn't mean you lost. It went viral, again. Comments flooded in. You just saved me from texting him back. I thought I was crazy for still hurting at 63. Thank you. My daughter thinks I should move on. But I need to mourn. You gave me permission. And then came an email. Subject, TED Talk. At first, I thought it was a scam, some phishing trick. But no, it was real. A producer had been following my blog, my podcast, my posts. She wanted me to speak at a women's empowerment conference, not because I was famous, but because I was true. She wrote, "You represent the millions of women who didn't fall apart. They just took longer to rebuild." I stared at that email for a long time. When you're 61, you don't expect invitations to begin. You expect people to start writing your endings. But this was a beginning. I said yes. The following weeks were a blur of preparation. Writing a speech, practicing in front of mirrors, voice cracking, heart pounding, remembering all the times I was told I was too intense, too sensitive, too old. But I wasn't too anything. I was ready. When the day arrived, Delilah drove me to the venue. As I sat backstage, mic clipped to my blouse, hands trembling just slightly, I thought about how far I'd come. Not in distance, in self-respect, in choosing to stop chasing what didn't want to stay. The stage lights hit me like a sunrise. I looked out at hundreds of faces, most of them women over 40, some nodding before I even opened my mouth. And then I spoke. "Hi, I'm Evelyn Marks. I'm 61, and I am not anyone's backup plan." A roar of applause. And then, silence as I told my story, not just about Marcus, but about being invisible after 50, about dating in the shadows, about relearning desire, about not settling for breadcrumbs when you've already starved long enough. When I finished, the standing ovation didn't feel like applause. It felt like a chorus. Afterward, women lined up to hug me, thank me, tell me their own stories. A 67-year-old widow who hadn't touched her diary in decades. A 55-year-old divorcee who had been hiding her paintings. A 70-year-old woman who said, "My granddaughter listens to your podcast with me." She said, "Sadana, you said are cool." Said I hadn't felt cool in 30 years. I went home that night with sore feet, a full heart, and a new idea. Not just a podcast. Titled, "The Backup Plan Was Me All Along." It would be a mix of essays, stories, healing prompts, and letters. Not to men, but to ourselves. Letters like, "Dear woman who stayed too long." "Dear me, before the divorce." "Dear 58-year-old body I thought no one would want." I wrote like wildfire. I didn't eat right. I barely slept, but I felt alive. My fingers had finally caught up with my soul. The night I finished the last chapter, I didn't celebrate with champagne. I sat in the quiet. Let it wash over me. Grief, joy, power, loss, all dancing together. The woman who had once waited for a text that never came was now an author. The woman who once thought romance was the reward was now building something more permanent, a legacy. And just as I closed my laptop, a final email popped up. It was from Clara, the first woman who'd ever written to me. She said, "You don't know this, but I used to sleep on the right side of my bed, even after my husband died. just in case someone else came along. Last night, I moved to the center because I sat, not waiting anymore. I sat, living. I whispered to the screen, "Me too, Clara." I didn't expect the book to take off. Honestly, I thought it would live in a quiet corner of the internet, shared by women like me, bruised, breathing, rebuilding, but it didn't stay quiet. Within 2 weeks of publishing, the backup plan was me all along, hit #4 in the memoir category on Amazon. 3 weeks later, I was invited to speak on a national morning show, the kind I used to watch in my robe with a cup of tea, wondering how other women got there. Now I was that woman. It wasn't glamour. It wasn't makeup or lights or flattering dresses. It was one sentence, one truth. I said, "Live." Without blinking. At 61, I stopped trying to be someone that's perfect ending and became my own damn plot twist. The producer said her entire crew clapped, not because they were told to, because they felt it. And just like that, I wasn't sent invisible anymore. But visibility is a strange thing. You get seen, and so do your wounds. People from my past started reaching out, old friends, old colleagues, even my ex-husband, Tom. He called one night. Just his name on my screen was enough to send chills down my spine. "Evelyn," he said slowly, "I read your book. I didn't no. You didn't want to know." I replied, "And that set's worse." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry." I almost believed him. But the truth was, if he'd said that a decade ago, maybe my heart would have cracked open. Now, it only flinched, then steadied. Apology accepted. I told him, but it one set be framed and hung on my wall. There was no rage, no revenge, just calm. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You survived." Delilah and I threw a small dinner party to celebrate the book launch. Just a few women, all over 50, all beautifully complicated. Susan, who ran her own bakery and divorced after 32 years. Rita, who's been ghosted by her fiancé at 59. And Linda, who lost her husband to cancer. Then her sense of identity to silence. We drank wine, laughed too loud, passed plates like communion, and, in between bites of roast chicken and baked brie, we told the truth. No filters. No pretending to move on, just because society expects it. At one point, Linda said, "I used to dread being alone in bed. Now I take up the whole thing and sleep like a queen." We all raised our glasses to that. But the high didn't last forever. That's the thing no one tells you about healing. It's not linear. You can be soaring one moment, and then, without warning, drop into grief like a sinkhole. It happened on a Tuesday. I was cleaning out a drawer in my hallway when I found an old note from Marcus, tucked into a book I meant to return. "You are my calm, my second chance." I sat on the floor, holding that piece of paper like it could still bleed. He had meant it. Once, and maybe that was the hardest part. Knowing he did love me, just not enough to stay. Not enough to fight for me when it got inconvenient. I didn't call him. Didn't text. Didn't post a poetic quote to release the ache. I lit a match, watched the edges curl, watched the flame eat the lie. And I whispered, "I am not a second chance. I am the first choice of my own life." After that, I changed my podcast name from Letters After 60 to something bolder. Plot twist, Evelyn. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was for all the women writing their next chapters without permission. A few days later, I received a DM. It was from her, Marcus Sepp's wife. It started simply, "You don't know me, but I know who you are." My heart tightened. "I wasn't supposed to read your book," Marcus begged me not to, but I did, every page twice. I didn't breathe. He told me parts of your story, left out the parts that made him look small, but your words, they made me question everything. And now I'm sitting here, 43 years old, wondering if I'm just the next version of the lie. I didn't reply. What would I even say? I wasn't angry at her. I wasn't superior. I was empathetic, tired, wise enough to know some cycles don't end until someone breaks them on purpose. So instead of messaging back, I recorded a new episode that night. No names, no blame, just this truth. If he made you doubt yourself even once, he will do it again. You don't need my blessing. You need your own boundaries. It went viral in under an hour. Something about those words struck like lightning in a dry forest. And I realized I wasn't just telling stories anymore. I was starting fires. The kind that warm women up after years of cold silence. One listener emailed, I 70. I threw out his toothbrush this morning. It had been sitting in my drawer for 6 years. Another said, you made me buy red lipstick again. He always said it was too much, but I am too much, and now I own it. I read every message like scripture. They weren't set about Marcus. They weren't set about revenge. They were about returning to our own damn names. I, Evelyn Marks, was no longer the woman who waited on someone else's timeline. I was building mine. And for the first time in 61 years, I wasn't afraid of turning older. I was afraid of turning quiet again. The strangest thing about reclaiming your power is realizing how long you lived without it. It's like walking through your house after a storm and noticing all the cracks you painted over just to survive, and suddenly you can't unsee them. After the podcast exploded, people started calling me an inspiration. It made me uncomfortable at first. I wasn't trying to be anyone's hero. I was just trying not to disappear. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't scared anymore. One morning, while sipping coffee in my kitchen, I received an invitation. It was from a woman named Nora, a therapist who ran weekend retreats for women over 50. She wanted me to come speak. I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't my thing, but Delilah looked at me over the rim of her mug and said, Evelyn, this is what you asked the universe for. Don one whisper now. So I packed a small bag and drove 3 hours up the coast. The retreat center was nestled between redwoods and fog, the kind of place where silence wasn't empty. It was full. When I walked into the lodge, 25 women looked up from their journals, different faces, different griefs, same eyes that had once believed someone else's story more than their own. I told them mine, about being 61 and foolishly hopeful, about Marcus and the promises he made, about the brutal quiet that followed when I realized I was just a placeholder, not a priority. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't dramatize it either. I told them how betrayal doesn't always come with slammed doors. Sometimes it comes with a slow, polite exit and no explanation. After I finished, one woman stood up, tears in her eyes. I 67, she said, and I still flinch when the phone rings at night. Not because I scared, but because I hope, and that the most dangerous part. I nodded, because I understood. Hope was a double-edged sword. It can lift you out of despair or keep you tied to it. Later that night, I sat on the deck alone, watching the trees breathe in the wind. Nora joined me, holding 2 glasses of wine. She asked, "Do you think you ever let someone in again?" I didn't answer right away. I think I let myself in first. I finally said, "The rest we shall see." When I got home, something unexpected happened. Marcus called again. This time, I answered. He sounded tired, slower, like a man who had read the final chapter and realized he was no longer in the book. I saw your interview, he said. You looked free. I am, I replied. There was a pause. Then, the words that hung between us like a noose. I made a mistake. It wasn't set a confession. It wasn't set noble. It was cowardice, disguised as clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just said, Marcus, I was never your mistake. You were mine. And I forgave myself. He exhaled, like he was expecting something else, maybe a second chance, maybe a sliver of weakness. But I had none left to offer him. After we hung up, I opened a fresh journal and wrote one sentence. Healing isn't sad about getting answers. It's sad about no longer needing them. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I bought a ticket to Florence. Not for anyone else, not to escape, just because I'd always wanted to go, and I was done waiting for permission. In Florence, I walked until my feet ached. I ate gelato at sunset. I stood in front of the Duomo and cried, not because it was beautiful, but because I was still here, still alive, still becoming. A local artist stopped me in the street and asked if he could sketch me. I laughed. You mean this old face? He smiled gently. It's not old. It's earned. The sketch now hangs in my hallway. Every wrinkle, every line, captured like a map of survival. When I returned home, I published my second book. This one wasn't set about Marcus. It was about me, titled, After the Fire, Letters to the Woman I Buried. It was raw, fierce, honest, and it sold faster than the first. One review said, Evelyn doesn't write memoirs. She writes mirrors. I wept when I read that. Because finally, I was being seen for who I was, not who I used to be, in someone else's shadow. A few weeks later, something surreal happened. Netflix called. They were interested in adapting my first book. I laughed out loud when I got off the call, because the woman who once begged a man to choose her was now choosing contracts. A producer asked, Do you want to say in who plays you? I paused. No, I said. I just want her to be real. Wrinkles, gray roots, all of it. Because this story, my story, wasn't about the fairy tale. It was about the fight. About a woman who looked in the mirror at 61 and decided she wasn't done yet. And neither am I. When the Netflix deal became official, I thought the strangest part would be watching someone else reenact my life. But the strangest part was how normal everything else remained. I still took out the trash. I still watered my plants. I still cried when the tea kettle whistled at night, because that was when Marcus used to say, Your tea's singing again, sweetheart. But I didn't cry for him anymore. I cried for the woman I used to be. For the nights I convinced myself I was lucky just to be chosen, even if it was temporary. The filming began in January. They shot in a coastal town that looked nothing like mine, but somehow it felt familiar. On the first day of shooting, they invited me to visit the set. I stood behind the camera, watching the actress playing me, a woman in her 60s with laugh lines, strong posture, and a gaze that didn't flinch. She delivered my monologue from the retreat. Healing is set about getting answers. It's set about no longer needing them. Everyone applauded. But I just stood there, silent, because in that moment, I wasn't watching a performance. I was watching a resurrection. Afterwards, the director approached me. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I'm not used to seeing my pain lit so beautifully. He smiled. It sits not your pain we sit highlighting. It sits your power. That night, I sat in my hotel room with a single glass of wine and no regrets. For the first time in years, I didn't wonder who might text. I wasn't hoping for a voice message or a late night apology. The silence was mine, and I loved it. But the world had other plans. 2 days after that visit, I received a message from a woman named Claire. She introduced herself as Marcus's ex-wife. The first ex-wife. I know this might be strange, she wrote, but I watched your podcast. I think we should talk. I hesitated. What could we possibly gain from reopening old wounds? But curiosity is a persistent force, so I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. When she walked in, I felt like I was looking at a future version of myself, or maybe an alternate past. Her face was tired, but her eyes carried the same haunted hope I once wore like perfume. We ordered tea, and then she said it. I just wanted to say thank you for speaking out. I blinked. She continued. Marcus broke me in places I didn't say no could crack, and for years I thought it was just me, that I wasn't sent enough, that maybe if I smiled more, aged slower, talked less, been someone else. I finished for her. She nodded, tearful. Exactly. We sat there in silence, sipping our tea, not as rivals, but as survivors, two women who had loved the same man and paid the same price. Before she left, she took my hand and said, "You gave women like me permission to be angry and to move on." That night, I wrote a new journal entry. Sometimes your healing is the key to someone else's freedom. I didn't expect what came next. My inbox overflowed with letters. Women from Spain, from Ohio, from Cape Town, widows, divorcee, mothers, even one woman in her 70s who said, I haven't been touched in 30 years, but your words made me feel seen. I cried, not because it hurt, but because it finally mattered. That following weekend, I gave a speech at a women's summit in Chicago. When I walked on stage, 500 women stood and clapped, not for a celebrity, not for a survivor, but for someone who dared to tell the unpretty truth. I stood at the podium and looked around. No one dreams of being broken at 61, I said, but sometimes, being broken is how you find the pieces that were never truly yours to begin with. They listened, and I spoke from the place in my chest where all the silenced versions of me had gathered, the one who cried quietly in bathroom stalls, the one who pretended to laugh through canceled anniversaries, the one who waited for Marcus to mean it this time. I gave them all the mic. After the speech, an editor from a major publication approached me. We studs like to run your story on the cover, she said. Full spread, no retouching. I was stunned. You want these wrinkles front and center? She laughed. We want them because they sound real. The world is starved for real. I agreed. And weeks later, my face, every soft crease and freckle, was on newsstands across the country with the headline, At 61, she refused to be someone's backup plan and became a blueprint instead. It felt surreal, but also just like justice didn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it came through mirrors, through pages, through the echo of your own voice, finally rising after years of being told to stay quiet. And somewhere in that echo, I finally found Evelyn, not the version who bent for love, not the one who waited by the phone, not the woman who fell apart when a man disappeared, but the one who rose, brick by brick, from every lie she once believed. And this time, she was here to stay. The day the episode aired, I didn't invite anyone over. No watch party, No wine, just me, a blanket, and the soft hum of an old lamp flickering in the corner. I wasn't nervous, not really. I was still, like the calm that settles after a storm so loud, you almost forget what silence sounds like. As the first scene played, I barely recognized myself, not because the actress didn't look like me, she did, but because she held her head higher. Her steps didn't hesitate, her smile didn't ask for permission. She was the woman I had become, not the one I was when Marcus told me I was too much for his new life. Midway through, there was a scene where she sits across from a man who looks like Marcus. Not identical, but close enough to make my breath hitch. He leans in and says, "I didn't this mean to hurt you." And she doesn't set cry. She doesn't set flinch. She just responds, "But you did." And I am finally allowed to say that out loud. I paused the screen, because that line, that truth, wasn't in the script. It came from the actress. Her own rewrite, her own truth, layered onto mine. And it was perfect. The episode ended with her walking through a field of sunflowers, alone, smiling, hand grazing the golden petals, no lover waiting at the end, no phone call to redeem the silence, just her whole after being broken. I turned off the TV, stood by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on, one by one, like little reminders, you survived the dark before, and you will again. The next morning, my inbox was overflowing. Agents, publishers, even an invitation to speak at a university women's symposium. But the message that stayed with me wasn't from a brand or a producer. It was from a woman named Gloria, 67, widowed. She wrote, "I watched your story, and for the first time since my husband passed, I didn't feel invisible. I made tea and sat with myself like I was worth sitting with. Thank you." That did it. That broke me in a way that healed. Because for so long, I thought I needed Marcus to feel worthy. But here I was, inspiring women to reclaim rooms they were told to shrink in. So I said yes. Yes to the book deal. Yes to the speaking tour. Yes to me. The next year moved fast. I stood on stages in 5 countries, talked to thousands of women, cried with them, laughed with them, shared hotel bathrooms with strangers turned sisters who whispered, "Me too," like it was a prayer. But the moment that sealed it all came on a quiet afternoon in Milan. I just finished a talk at a retreat center when a young woman approached me, maybe 30 at most. She looked nervous. "I know your message is for older women," she said. "But I grew up watching my mom become invisible after my dad left. Your story made me want to see her again." She handed me a photo. Her mom, wrinkles, yes, but radiant, strong, like a tree that had weathered decades of storms and still stood tall. "I sent her your video," the girl whispered. She started painting again. That night, I wrote my last journal entry for that chapter. My story didn't end with heartbreak. It began with it. And maybe, just maybe, that sets where all the best stories begin. So here's what I want you. The woman watching this, maybe alone, maybe freshly broken, maybe 58 or 67 or 43, and wondering if this is all there is to know. You are not too late. You are not too old. You are not invisible. You are a novel still being written. And even if someone once treated you like a backup plan, that does not make you a second-rate soul. You were always the main character. You just forgot for a while. So now, take a breath. Stand up and write your next chapter so boldly that even your regrets sit up and take notice. Because if Evelyn could rebuild her life at 61, so can you. If this story touched you, even a little, hit that like button. Share it with a friend who needs to hear this. And don't forget to subscribe to Ex-Wife Diaries for more stories that aren't just about heartbreak, but about rising from it. Turn on notifications, because next week's story, it might just be yours.